A goal for a lot of people who are getting into syndications, at least, is hopefully, to some people, it's to do the bare minimum, which is I just want to fire and retire early, and that's it. I'm not looking to put points up on the scoreboard and make as much from my investments as possible. And that's fine. But for people who are looking to replace their W-2 income with the income that they're making from their investments, later on in life, if anything, when you're growing your wealth, if anything, you're going to face higher tax rates for a couple of reasons. One, over.
Hi everyone, welcome to Investing for Generational Wealth. I'm John Lai. I'm here with my partner, friend, Keshav Kolur at Clive Capital, where we help high earners just like you invest outside of the stock market to passively achieve long-term wealth generation through superior risk-adjusted returns, long-term passive income, or cash flow, and tax benefits. And together with investors, we're helping investors invest in over 1,000 multifamily apartments under renovation and over 500 single-family rentals under development. And we're expanding into private debts, into industrial and commercial real estate, into oil and gas ventures, and much, much more to help create a diversified, balanced portfolio. Just like always, quick disclaimer, we are not financial advisors. All investments are subject to risk, including the possible loss of the money you invest. So please perform your due diligence and consult your CPA, your financial advisors, and your attorney before making any investments. Again, I'm John Lai. I'm here with my partner and special guest today, and we do this on a monthly basis, Keshav Kolur. Keshav, we're going to talk about financial independence via passive income today. Do you want to talk a little bit about yourself? I think people know how you got to where you are today, but specifically about financial independence and how you're structuring your passive income portfolio.
Yeah, sure. That's a loaded question, but yeah, we'll dig into it. Thanks for having me on today, John. Always an honor to come back and speak among the very other bright minds that we have on the show. So I would say my story, how I originally got started. I graduated college in 2019, and I just knew that I didn't want to work for someone else for the rest of my life. So I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, like many of us do, and that got me started thinking about real estate. At the time, I didn't think about syndications. I thought I had to go out and buy and rent single-family homes and do that all the way to financial freedom. So I got my realtor's license 5 years ago now. I feel old. That's one of those moments. But February 29th, leap day of 2020, I got licensed as a realtor in Michigan. Then we remember a few weeks later, COVID broke out. So the markets shut down. Couldn't do much then. But once the markets opened back up, I helped a couple of folks buy and sell homes later that summer. So from that and my W-2, I was a software engineer at a car company at the time in Detroit. I had enough capital to start looking at real estate deals and single family homes. Luckily, before I went too far down that rabbit hole, one of my good friends from college sent me a Reddit thread about someone who was investing into apartment buildings. And to me, that sounded a lot cooler. And he said that, he was a tech executive. He, at his peak, owned 40 single family homes. And he said that buying an apartment building was more lucrative, had more tax advantages, and was not a pain in the butt. It was actually passive and it was scalable. So at the time, I didn't know anyone who was doing this. And I thought it was too good to be true, but I reached out to this person just to learn more, just a Reddit conversation, talking to strangers as you do, and got to network, attended a lot of the events that he hosted. At the time, it was Zoom events, everything was virtual. So I met a lot of people in the industry and just learned for myself that this was possible. And I thought to myself, hey, this is one, it's more lucrative. 2, the tax benefits are better. And 3, it's passive. Why do I want to do single family home investing? So at Clive Capital today, we typically target investments that are a 15 to 30% IRR. 15 on the really conservative end, and then 30 on the very high risk end. I don't know of a single family investment out there that does a 15% return, or a strategy that does 15% return passively and consistently. You could tell me your strategy does 17% actively. Maybe it does. I haven't found a single family strategy that does that, but even if it does that actively, how much time does that involve out of your day, right? And what are your other obligations? Do you have a W-2 job? Do you have a spouse and kids, right? So I think that's an important thing to consider. The only reason I would recommend someone not to go down the syndication route is if you are just unable to bring yourself to trust other people. That is really it. There's a saying, I forget where, or proverb from where, but if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others, go together. So syndication, so I picked syndications. That to me was my path to financial freedom. So I made my first investment into an apartment building in San Antonio in September of 2021, almost a year after I actually learned about this concept, vetted it, made sure I wasn't just wiring my money to some goon who's going to run off to the Bahamas with it. And in September 2021, once I invested, I started receiving monthly cash flow payments. And that to me was a proof of concept that, hey, this works. So I started Clive Capital in January of 2022, figuring that, hey, if I'm going to do this for myself, I might as well do it for my friends and family and anyone else who's interested. And so far, fast forward 3 years later, we're not as far as I would have liked, but something's better than nothing, I guess. We've helped investors invest into over 1,000 apartments under renovation, 500 single family rental homes under development. We just had our first industrial real estate closing. So think manufacturing warehouses. So we're expanding into that now in real estate. We have a private lending fund that is doing very well, double-digit returns in debt. And as you mentioned, oil and gas, we're getting ready to launch a new investment opportunity here pretty soon that I'm excited about. And a lot of our investors, given I'm at Meta, you're at Amazon, and we have a pretty good background in tech, a lot of our investors are in Amazon, Meta, Google, these top tech companies. So I say that all that because you and me and our colleagues, and if you're listening to this, you likely have the privilege of being able to afford a $50,000 investment every year. It's not a privilege that a lot of people can afford, but I think it is an opportunity that a lot of people sleep on. How I think about passive income, for me, industries that we're in are very high paying jobs, but we're in the boat of what the problem that many people call golden handcuffs. We get paid very well, but especially in these locales, in tech hubs or other finance hubs in California, in New York, and in Washington, we're taxed a lot, and especially at our tax brackets. So a lot of people don't realize that even if you make a lot of that money, a good amount of it is taxed very high. And then it's also about, I'm getting paid a lot, but how many hours am I having to work to earn that pay? What is the stress like? And these companies are constantly announcing layoffs, right? Especially now with AI coming out and the threat of a recession on the horizon. Your job security's, the guarantee of it is probably at its lowest that it's ever been. Amazon just announced they're going to axe 13,000 managers, I think. So everyone's looking to cut costs. Everyone's looking to replace you with AI. So I think passive income financial freedom is very important. And in the simplest terms, it's really maximizing how much you can earn, minimizing your expenses, and then investing the rest into investment vehicles that fit your investment strategy and what your financial goals are. And it depends on what you want to do once you are financially free. If you don't want to lift a finger ever again in your life and never have to earn another penny, your number to financial freedom and the kind of investments you're going to be making have to be a lot different than if you're going to continue working, but just running your own business or maybe working part-time. So it is a very person-to-person, situation-to-situation thing, but I hope that answered what you were getting at a little, at least.
It did. Thanks for the background. I'm thinking of individuals that work in corporate, W-2, have 401k available to them, like we mostly all are, and have available to that, as well as IRAs and others. And so we're used to investing in ETFs and mutual funds and individual stocks, maybe the bond market, right? If we're a little bit risk averse, but we're not used to investing outside of those domains of available investments because we just weren't exposed to those other types of investments, the passive income that we're talking about from either real estate, commercial or residential, or like these other passive income investments and tools. So I think the first step is really determining your goals for financial independence, right? Obviously, you have a lot of available tools in your toolbox to invest in your retirement, right? And if you think about retiring, right, essentially you want to leave your W-2 job and passively invest and live off your passive income. You have all these investments that you have built out through your 401k and your IRA, which are not really accessible to you right away. There are means of accessing those with some penalties, and maybe without some penalties, another means as well. But realistically, what you need to do is access them in some post-tax retirement account, right? And that, you can continue investing in those traditional vehicles, but you want to diversify as well. And so you want to diversify your risk from the fluctuations that we're seeing in the market today, whether it be up or down. But we've seen success in the past, call it 5 years. But historically, a bull run is like upwards of 5 to 8 years. So we're due for a correction at some point. And even the R word that financial pundits have told us these days that we might be facing, right? A recession. So how do you diversify those risks? And so you have to take that all into consideration as you think about your goals for financial independence. How do you meet the 4% or whatever withdrawal rate that you typically need to have in your fire phases, financial independence, retire early? So I think that's the first step, is determine your goals. Then you can help understand, based on your previous investments and your goals, how do you get to a state where you can live off your built up income, not only in retirement, which the 401k and IRAs will provide you, but also in the near term, right? Before you actually officially retire, right? And so I think that it's that perspective that you need to have. And that's what we're hoping to provide the audience today. Yes, you can invest in the stock market, but realistically, if you want to retire, you can't just rely on the stock market. There's too much fluctuation happening. How do we understand private equity and syndications as a vehicle for passive income? So like you invested in your first multifamily and you almost have to be an expert in an asset class or rely on someone that has done the due diligence, right? That either have experts in a particular field or know enough about a particular field or asset class to be knowledgeable about that. Could you talk a little bit about like how you approach that as an investor?
Yeah. So it definitely comes down to, again, everything, more broadly, everything in life. Everyone has their own approach to it. Specifically with finances, if your goal is financial freedom, what I like to focus on is cash flow rather than net worth. Because if you have $5 million in the stock market, call it, that could at any given day, or not a day, but over a week or 2 weeks, that could drop to 4 million. God forbid, it could even drop to 3.5 million. And there's a lot of volatility there. What has always helped me sleep a lot better at night, rather than building up a nest egg and slowly drawing down from it, is building a cash flow stream that will pay me regularly and has reduced volatility. So for that, I think our favorite investments with regards to that are debt investments, they're multifamily, and they're probably industrial real estate. Any real estate that you acquire in general that has either long-term leases that are very stable tenants, right? Or short-term leases, but multiple tenants, makes me feel comfortable. Long-term leases, single tenants, for us, that is our triple net leases that we're invested into. These are manufacturing companies they might close down a few locations, but they're not going to close down the location that we have bought because we only go after buying their headquarters. or their number one manufacturing site. So even if everything goes south, they're not going to shut down their headquarters unless they're completely bankrupt. But the goal is to do enough of a deep dive into their credit to make sure they don't go bankrupt. And on the other hand, right, that's one extreme. The other extreme is multifamily. Everyone needs a roof over their head. That doesn't mean that there's no risk, but it at least reduces the risk because it is an essential. And then second, you have multiple tenants in there so that even if 10 leave, 10 tenants leave, you still have another 90 tenants paying you in a 100-unit apartment building. And there we invest in primarily workforce housing. We don't go into too distressed. We also don't go into class A luxury skyrise buildings, because those are the ones that, when people start downsizing, they start cutting back on their budget, they're going to leave the high-rise buildings. Oh, I said skyrise. High-rise buildings into the apartments that we're buying. And lastly, there's debt, right? Debt, pretty easy. You lend to someone and you become the bank and they pay you a regular interest on the investment that you've made. So with multifamily and with industrial real estate, the cash flow that we typically look at is anywhere between 6 to 10%. So let's say now tying this back into financial freedom, let's say your expenses every year are $100,000. If let's assume the worst case that you get 5% cash flow to keep numbers easy, that means you need $2 million invested in a multifamily deal to regularly cash flow that amount, right? In the stock market, I don't know of dividends that go that high. If my memory serves me correctly, it's typically 3 to 4%. And if it is a dividend stock, then usually your appreciation is a lot less. In our case, though, not only do you get 6 to 10% cash flow, you get appreciation once you sell your investment, once we sell the investment. And at the end of the day, when you combine your cash flow, that 6 to 10% per year, with the profit from the sale, let's say at the end of year 5, you typically average out to between a 15 to 20% return. IRR, I should say, to be more specific. Stock market typically averages a 10% IRR. Even assuming bull runs. One of our investors recently asked, hey, why should I invest in this when the stock market's doing so well? It's because I did an analysis for him where I showed, hey, if you bought into an index in 2014 and you sold it now at the peak in 2024, like back when we were at the peak, you would still make at an 11% IRR, assuming you got the peak right? I'd have to go back and see what it was like to buy at the bottom of 2008. I would be very surprised if it was more than a 15% IRR, which is our base. That's the minimum that we do, whereas that is the best the stock market can do from the trough, the bottom of a recession, to the top of an expansion. If you're some sort of G, basically. So that is multifamily or industrial real estate, right? Take your cash flow and then divide it by whatever your FIRE number is, however much income you need. So if you have $2 million invested at a deal that's 5% cash flow conservatively, then you get $100,000 per year. You don't need a $5 million nest egg, a $10 million nest egg. What you need is a cash flow machine. You don't need a big nest egg. If you're investing into debt, right? And again, the numbers I'm saying are before any taxes or anything like that. So you might have to work backwards and maybe include some sort of buffer. So maybe rather than $100,000, maybe you want to have $150,000 in cash flow to be conservative, which means you need $3 million invested in multifamily. If you're doing debt investment, there is no upside, but your cash flow per year is a lot higher. I don't know that we'll ever see COVID rates again. I could be wrong, but let's assume that you can get consistent 10% for the money that you lend out, just a 10% interest rate. You're lending to the right people, or you're investing in the right debt investment opportunity. For example, we have a debt investment opportunity that is been achieving 16 to 18% return every year consistently. If you're interested, feel free to check that out in our investor portal. But let's assume that you're not doing anything crazy like that. You're doing standard loan 10%. If you're looking for a cash flow of same numbers as before, 150,000, now rather than having to invest $3 million because your cash flow is twice as high, you're investing $1.5 million. And at a 10% cash flow per year, there's your $150,000 per year to live off of, right? So it's a matter of, again, figuring out what that number is for you, kind of projecting out, and then also just being conservative, right? If you think you can get this maybe 10% cash flow, model it at 8 or 7% and see how much you would need. Because the job market, at least out there right now, as far as we can tell, in certain industries at least, is pretty tough. Once you make the leap, I personally at least would never want to go back. So once you're out, make sure you can stay out, no matter what happens, a recession, short of, I don't know, anything cataclysmic, you shouldn't have to go back.
Yeah. And thank you for that. So just as anecdotes, personally, I've invested in the mezzanine debt fund, and I invested through a SDIRA, a self-directed IRA account. It's a custodial account that you can open up with a third-party provider. And that allows me to shield the interest income that's being distributed, right, within that account. So I don't have to pay any taxes on it. And so I pull it out. Now, if you have an IRA, Roth IRA in particular, that makes it even more interesting. I didn't invest through a Roth IRA, but if you had a Roth IRA, it makes it interesting because then you can pull out your contributions, capital contributions into the Roth IRA. And if you transfer that Roth IRA into the SDIRA, as you invest and earn that interest income, you can pull out the capital contributions for your Roth basically anytime tax-free, because it's your money that you put in after tax. You can pull that out as you need it during your passive income retirement years, right? You can use that and then just continue having the interest income accrue within your accounts and then reinvest it back into the mezzanine debt fund. So you can have it continually working for you while you pull tax-free out your capital contributions into your Roth IRA, which is kind of an interesting strategy that I call it like 2-3 years ago, I didn't really think of, but from a passive income, financial independence, retirement perspective, that's a strategy you can employ, right? There are other strategies like that you can employ that make it pretty interesting and allow you to invest and minimize your taxes.
One thing to note there that I've been thinking about, and I've seen a couple of posts on this, and also read a book, Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright, Robert Kiyosaki's tax man in this, I think right hand man. We'll just say tax man, is the placement or the place for a retirement account in your portfolio. So depending on what your financial goals are, if you're young enough, and you have a retirement account, the assumption a retirement account makes is that your income later on in your life will be less, right? That's why you want to delay taxes, is because you're earning now and you're going to be taxed a lot now. Why not save that taxes for later? But a goal for a lot of people who are getting into syndications, at least, is hopefully, to some people, it's to do the bare minimum, which is, I just want to fire and retire early, and that's it. I'm not looking to put points up on the scoreboard and make as much from my investments as possible. And that's fine. But for people who are looking to replace their W-2 income with the income that they're making from their investments, later on in life, if anything, when you're growing your wealth, if anything, you're going to face higher tax rates for a couple of reasons. One, over time, just the way things have been trending, one question you should ask yourself is, do I see tax rates going up or going down for individuals in the future? That's one. Number two is really like, what does my life look like? Right now, most people have a lot of deductions that they can take advantage of for having children, for example, right? Dependents. I don't know if some portion of your mortgage payment's a deduction too, but there are all these deductions that you can take now, paying off homes, student loans, cars, things like that. Whereas later on in your life, you're not going to have those deductions. You're going to have very minimal deductions. So one, if you're looking to increase your investment value, your taxable income is going to go up. Two, you're going to have fewer deductions going forward. And then three, overall, I think tax rates could just go up in the future. So if anything, if you're not close to your retirement age, it might make sense to actually sell out of your retirement account, pay the penalty now, basically, and get it invested into a syndication or some opportunity where at least you've paid your dues now, right? In a lower tax bracket, rather than paying it potentially later in a higher tax bracket. So that's just something potentially to consider. I am probably, whenever I do fire, will likely just sell out of my 401k, pay the penalty, pay the tax man, and then tell him to screw off and never visit me again with regards to that money. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I would say the other strategy is as you go fire, right? The first couple of years, maybe not the initial year, but the year after that, your income would probably drop, right? And if your income probably drops, then you can do the Roth laddering, or you can essentially do the Roth conversion where you can pay taxes on a lower tax bracket, in a much, much lower tax bracket than you were experiencing. And then you can convert your Roth to, under your traditional to a Roth. Then, you can invest that again into real estate. So that's also something to consider.
Yeah, I would say the subjected IRAs are best used for debt investments, just because you cannot take advantage of depreciation in the retirement account. So if you're investing into oil and gas, especially, please do not use a retirement account.
Right.
You can, you're just giving up a lot of tax benefits. Same thing with real estate, you're giving up tax benefits there too. But unfortunately for a lot of people, their 401k is one of their main sources of liquid cash, right? So if that's your only investment option, then it makes sense. But if you have the option, try to use cash for opportunities where there's depreciation to take advantage of, and use retirement accounts for opportunities where there's no depreciation to take advantage of, like debt investments or even investments into startups. Startups. Yeah.
There are individuals that invest in residential real estate. I call them short-term rentals. Like STRs were hot maybe 3-4 years ago, and everyone was trying to get into a STR before interest rates increased. The individuals investing in residential versus commercial, like why should they invest in one or the other? Or if they're already in one, call it, a couple of homes, why should they think about diversifying into commercial, diversifying into other asset classes?
Yeah, I'm going to frame this again in terms of FIRE, right? Because that's the topic here, and just going passive in general, or how to get to FIRE and eventually enjoying martinis on a beach somewhere, if that's what you wanted retirement. So single family homes are an okay investment vehicle, but they are very operationally intensive, and the profit margins aren't as great as they could be. As you get older, you're going to have less energy, less mental faculty to manage your own portfolio. And so, your financial performance on the portfolio will likely decline. If you choose to outsource it to someone, you still have to manage that person. You still have to manage the property manager. You still have to manage the contractors. And if something goes wrong, the tenants can sue you, or your contractor could be stealing money from you. Those are all headaches. When, again, the goal of financial independence is that these sort of headaches aren't a part of your day-to-day anymore. And it's not, I think none of our goals are to go from corporate headaches, desk job headaches, to property management headaches. The goal in life is to reduce the amount of headaches that you get, not just change the type of headaches. So that's one. It's just going to be more difficult as time progresses for you to be able to keep up with your portfolio. And two, again, they do, vastly across the board for the most part, underperform syndications. Again, because there's a lack of economies of scale, and there's a lack of diversification in your strategy also. And if you're investing in just single family, not only, you're not able to diversify as easily geographically. Like it's difficult to get a single family home in Illinois, and then another one in Hawaii, and then another one in Kentucky. Whereas for us in syndications, we just have to find the partners that we trust in each of those areas, and we can invest with them pretty easily. We don't have to worry about the headaches of property management or even finding the deal ourselves. All we have to do is find the people and make sure that we can trust them, obviously. But also, in addition to making geographical diversification hard, it's difficult to diversify your asset classes. You're stuck to just single family residential. You cannot do what we're doing, like buying multifamily apartment buildings, building ground up developments of built to rent homes, investing in a private debt, investing in oil and gas, investing into small businesses. Each of these asset classes has different benefits. For example, in oil and gas, one of the biggest benefits that we and our investors like so far is the ability to reduce your taxable W-2 income. I'm pretty sure it's all types of income, but it is at least W-2 income. That is difficult to do, when this is obviously before you fire. But on your way to fire, if you just stick with single family, you're going to still pay very high taxes on your W-2 job, unless your wife or your spouse, I should say, is a real estate professional. So you're missing out basically on a bunch of benefits that other asset classes have that single family homes don't have. I would say those are some of the big reasons that I would encourage people to explore outside of single family. And the ways that you can do that, one is pretty easily sell out of the single family. That's the easiest way to do it, right? Is to get out of it and then allocate it into another investment opportunity. The second, if you've built up a decent amount of equity in the real estate, whether it's single family, duplex, triplex, quadplex, even some of the smaller multifamily buildings, 10 units, 20 units, we see this often. A lot of the owners, they're getting into retirement age or they want to hang up their cleats. They've built up a good amount of equity in the homes. And what you can do is you can 1031 that equity into a syndication. Typical syndication minimums for 1031s are $1 million in equity. If you bought a home in the Bay Area or anything in the Bay Area or New York, I'm sure you probably hit that. But that, I would say, is an alternative. If you want to kick the can down the road, not pay the tax man right now, you have that $1 million in equity that you're sitting on, you want to transition from active to passive, the 1031 is an opportunity to. Maybe you could package them up where you sell a bunch of your entire portfolio and 1031 all of them into an opportunity. That's something that we're looking into as an option for some of our investors too. But it's just sell is the exit that I would recommend, but it's how do you sell? And so you could either sell outright or you could 1031 into a syndication opportunity and wipe your hands clean, pass on the torch to someone else who is willing to handle the operational headaches of managing an asset.
This question came in, I think was the answer. What's the tax implications for you investing using an SDIRA into real estate? I heard you can't take depreciation. That is correct. You cannot take depreciation within an SDIRA.
You cannot take depreciation, but your gains don't go taxed either. It follows the same tax treatment of whatever the vehicle is, right? It's either tax deferred or it's tax free. If it's a Roth IRA, it's tax free, for example, self-directed Roth IRA. So you don't pay taxes, but in the moment, but you follow whatever the tax treatment is of the specific self-directed IRA vehicle that you are in, whether it's paying taxes later or just never paying taxes at all. But you don't get to take benefit of the depreciation that you would have gotten otherwise.
Yeah. I think an interesting, not really a corollary, is that if you invested within a solo 401k, again, through a custodian, a third-party custodian, you could invest in real estate that has taken on debt. So traditionally, if you invest through a custodian, you would be subject to UBTI or UBIT taxes, where you would have to pay a portion because some of the financing is done through debt capitalization. But if you invested through a solo 401k, that's not subject to UBIT apparently. So do your research. Obviously, we're not accountants, but if you are and you do have a solo 401k and you're interested in investing in real estate and you do want to take advantage of debt, you potentially could do that through a solo 401k. Interesting side note.
Yeah, we should include a link to our webinar with Scott regarding self-directed IRAs and how they work.
Yes, great idea. One other comment would be like, how do you know? And we've talked personally ourselves too, like, how do we know when we're ready to retire from a fire perspective? Retire financially independent, and you retire and you don't have to worry about work anymore. I think it's subjective, right? It's up to you as an investor when you think you can retire based on your needs, whether you take the 4% rule and then you understand like what your potential market growth is. It really depends on you. It's a very personal decision. And then we can talk personally ourselves, like when we believe we are ready to retire. I'm ready to retire now, but it really is dependent on a number of things. Obviously, if you have a family, that you have to take that into consideration. If you have that 4%, or maybe it's 5% or 3%, whatever you think from an expense perspective, you need to live on every year. You have to factor that in addition to the overall return of your portfolio. If you believe your portfolio is returning 7, 8%, and you need to live 3% off of your portfolio, and you're netting to 4%, then you can use to grow your portfolio year after year. And you don't have to worry about the things you heard. If that net result is zero, then you won't be growing your portfolio. Just know that there are people who want to retire with zero, right? And so that's an option for them. They're not growing the portfolio. They're actually growing the portfolio a little bit, but they're willing to retire with zero. That's always an option for them. Keshav, do you have a thought on that? Like, when do you think you're going to retire? What would prompt you?
Well, I think one call out I'll make is that you want your investments growing slightly every year, your income, just to match your expenses, because inflation is going to ratchet up your lifestyle costs, regardless of whether or not you decide to vacation or whatever it is. The cost of bread and essential goods will still go up year over year. So I would factor in some room for growth. Maybe to be conservative, like every year you should be, probably netting an extra, 5%. And then let's say inflation comes in around 2-3%, then you're continue to grow every year slightly. So, I don't see myself retire ever, but because I do like what we do here at Clive Capital and just helping other people passively invest into these opportunities. It's just really interesting to see all the types of businesses out there. There's not enough lifetimes to work on all the interesting projects out there that exist. But as far as like going full time into it, I think that's just a matter of covering your, whatever expenses your business generates, and then plus your lifestyle expenses, right? And then maybe a little bit of buffer in case business suffers 1 year. So I think that's kind of how I'm looking at it is, here's my business expenses, here are my life expenses, here's whatever 10-20% buffer. And then what kind of opportunities am I getting into and how long-term are they, right? This, for example, the mezzanine debt fund strategy works right now. Will it still work 2 years from now? Will my business model still work 2 years from now? If it doesn't, like, what am I going to do then? So I think that's just how I'm thinking about how our business performance is going to affect, or as a business owner, how your business performance is going to affect your retirement. Right. Think about what existential threats exist and then just plan around it before you take the lead.
And factor in other things like obviously sequence of returns risk, right? Factor that in, which is like if the market drops as you retire, that's going to affect your retirement. But that will mean that it'll be a little bit more difficult to get back to your starting point, right? Factor that in. Also, factor all the streams of income that you have. So another question would be, you might rely on your 401k, your IRA, and then for retirement, as you reach that retirement age, pre-retirement, you have other sources of income through hopefully like this post-tax accounts or an SDIRA account, right? But how do you live off of the income that you have? I've been told that you might want to include 6 months or allocate 6 months of cash reserves in case anything big comes up, right, in your retirement. So definitely think about that. How do you look at So we're chin deep in the world of alternative assets. You, as an investor, as a passive investor, may not be knowledgeable about all the different nuances of oil and gas and of multifamily, of mezzanine debt funds. As an investor, not necessarily us, where do you go to find out information and who do you trust? Like, how do you do that assessment? How do you do that due diligence of a trusted advisor?
So one, it is our jobs. So that means, we do get pretty good at this, but I think it's one, surrounding yourself with the right people, as cheesy as it sounds. If none of your colleagues or your family is investing into syndications, you don't have anyone to review deals with, it's going to be pretty lonely and sad. I kid. I find fun in reviewing investments alone or with people. I deal with people, but that's one, just getting the right rooms, and you all can discuss who you're investing with, compare notes, attend networking events, things like that. That's the in-person component, is just getting physically around the right people. Second is just connecting with people like John or myself, right? Or just following the right people on social media too, who are doing these syndications. So I think between those two ways, and then you can find those people just by searching, like, hey, real estate syndicators, who's out there doing, multifamily value add. Going on a lot of these crowdfunding portals will give you some idea. But these are just starting points. Once you have a list of people, you can start vetting of like who to invest with, whether it's a fund management company like us, or an operator, So a fund management company, we invest into multiple things. An operator who is actually managing these assets typically only invests into one or two things. Asset classes, I should say. Once, get in front of them, I would just do a deep dive on them, right? Go through their social media and their online presence. What does that look like? And then how does their website, how's their marketing looking? And then once you go and obviously schedule time to talk with them, we have a list of questions, 100 questions, 100 or 110 on our website that we prepared that you can ask anyone you invest with. Regardless of whether they're a fund manager or an operator, whether it's oil and gas or multifamily, you should be asking these questions. And it's a lot of simple questions like, hey, tell me about a time when you had your worst deal and why did it happen? What did you learn? And, why do you do this? What risks do you see? So some of those questions just to assess their competence and how they think about things. And then ask for testimonials from other investors, from professionals that they work with, like bankers, CPAs, attorneys, insurance companies, title companies, etc. Put all of that together, ask for some collateral as far as past deals that they've done. Let me see your private placement memorandum, your PPM, your legal documents. Let me see your underwriting and how you're being conservative in your underwriting. Let me see your data room and how you put together, rent comps and sale comps, and how are you coming up with these numbers? And then I would say at that point, at some point you will feel like you have 80% of the information you need. You'll never have all the facts with anything in life, really, right? Whether it's dating and, even marrying someone, there's unknowns. When I try to translate to a personal level where other people can understand, people are dynamic, investments are dynamic, businesses are dynamic. The only constant in this world is that there is no constant. It's always changing. So you're never going to have 100% of the information. And if you do, those facts will likely change over the course of your investment. These investments in private equity, in syndications, they're illiquid, meaning your money's locked up for anywhere from 90 days to 10 years. So, tomorrow is going to look different from today. So who's to say what 5 years from now looks like, right? All that to say, you're not going to have the information. There is some risk. All investment carries risk. Everything in life carries a little bit of risk. But that's what makes it worth doing too, right? As long as you have calculated the risk and you've mitigated it, once you have the information, it's just a matter of actually taking the jump. Don't get stuck in analysis paralysis like I did for a year. Like a lot of people listening to this. Yeah. A lot of people listening to this likely will, because you will be analytical. That's probably why you're paid so well, is that you can analyze data and figures and, metrics and stories really well. But, investing is a little bit of an art and a science. So take the leap with money. You're fine losing, worst case, completely. So that, one $50,000 investment it shouldn't put you out on the streets, right? And it shouldn't have you worrying about how you're going to put food on the table. It's not a fun investing experience for you. And it's also not fun for whoever's on the other side, whether it's a fund manager like us or an operator. It's not a fun experience. And then, just evaluate how your investment's doing, stay on top of it. And then there'll be lessons along the way. There will be failed investments, and learn and get better over time. And then, eventually you'll hit that number, whatever it is, in passive income, if that's your goal. You'll hit that 100,000, 150,000, 200,000. It'll take time. It's not crypto. It's not a get rich quick scheme, but it's going to take years of, earning really well, saving really well, and investing really well consistently. Call it 10, 15 years, 20 years from when you start. But you'll be better off than, most others who unfortunately aren't investing in these types of opportunities.
Yeah. And I would add to that the analysis paralysis, no, don't get caught up in having to know 100% of the information, because you will never know 100% of the information, right? And even if you have 80% of the information, don't keep cycling on the information. At some point, you have to invest with someone that you know, like, and trust. And key point is do your due diligence, but be comfortable with the person or the company that you invest in, right? If you trust them and you've done your due diligence, vetted and talked to other individuals, whether they're previous investors or other friends, family, or people who know them, then that should be enough. And you obviously agree with the investment. That should be enough that you should be able to jump in. Don't take your time like we did. It took me a good, like 5-7 years before I'd make my first investment. Shouldn't have.
That's how long you knew about syndications?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so yeah, it took me a while, and I wish I would have started earlier, because now, as Keshav said, like, you're starting to we're starting to see the income flowing in, and that's starting to build up. And as you build that income progressively up until you meet your W-2, and then you even surpass your W-2, at that point, then you're ready to make the leap. So start today. Obviously, do your due diligence, investigate as much as you think you should, but don't over investigate. Don't get into a point of analysis paralysis. That's very common for technology professionals, because we're educated and, we want to know all the information. Unfortunately, that also leads oftentimes to analysis paralysis. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, I'll say, you and I have both established a couple $1,000s in passive income in just a short amount of time, in 3 years, I would say, while maintaining our W-2, again, all passively. So it's definitely achievable. And I echo that. Every person you talk to, most people you talk to, I did talk to someone who said he invested in a syndication and he'd never do it again because he lost his money on the first one. And I pitied that poor soul. This was a conversation I had on Monday. But experienced investors will tell you that they have had deals that went south, that they lost money on, that were caught up in lawsuits. Everyone has those stories. But I also think most people that you talk to who are in syndications, who are wealthy, will tell you the number one thing is, anything that they would have changed likely is they wish they had started sooner. Right. So
the other thing about high net worth, ultra high net worth individuals as well, if you look at their portfolio mix, yes, they have their primary residence. It's probably 10 to 15% of their portfolio, their net asset net worth. And then they have the stocks and bonds, which is probably an additional 30% or so. Then they have a lot of these passive investments, which make up an additional 30%. My math is, I'm not summing up the math. I'm not mathing the math. But at some point, they also have streams of income, right? Other streams of income, so whether it be businesses, whatever it might be. So just make sure that you have multiple streams of income. Yeah, you have your retirement income that's coming in at retirement phase, but you also have other streams of income as you think about being financially independent and retiring at some point. You want to have the multiple streams of income. So if one stream of income ever fails, you have the other streams of income to fall back on, and then you can build additional streams of income. Right? So that's also critical to know. If you want to mimic what the ultra high net worth individuals do, they have those streams of income, whether it be businesses, whether it be the passive investments and the like. All right. So I know we're at time. Any parting thoughts, Keshav, before we let everyone go?
I really think it's the step one, like the most immediate you can do is, again, figure out what you want life to look like after you leave your corporate job, and then spreadsheet it out accordingly, right? If you're running a business or you're building something up on the side, what's your expenses to look like there? What's your lifestyle expenses to look like? And then add a buffer in, obviously. And then it also depends on what your goals are after retirement too. But then work back from there and based on what kind of investments you're going to be making, right? What's my expected rate of return or cash flow every year? So if I say that, hey, I need $150,000 for my lifestyle, and then very generous buffer is an additional 50K, let's call it. So if you want 200K overall, then if you want 200K in cash flow, look at the investments you're making and figure out what kind of principal do you want invested. So if it's, again, multifamily, you probably want $4 million invested. If it is a debt investment, you probably want $2 million invested. Do that math out. We'll be working on some sort of calculator on our website to help folks with this too. So that is coming. Keep an eye out for that. And then just make sure that you're as positive as you want to be every year. Make sure that pot is growing slightly for emergencies in health or with loved ones, things like that. I think that's really it. And then just, while you're building up that nest egg, maximize your earnings, minimize your savings, invest smartly, invest wisely, invest well.
Great parting thoughts, Keshav, and thanks for your insight again. We'll circle back in about a month or so, but don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on whichever platform you're listening to this on, and make sure that we can continue bringing you the best educational content ever. Thanks, everyone. Until next time, keep learning to invest for generational wealth.
I was also going to say, leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback on whatever platform you're listening to us on. So leave us a review and a rating, and we really appreciate it.
That helps us. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.